Okay, in this video we're going to be installing a power outlet on our motorcycle so we can run our GPS, our phone chargers, any other accessory you want to plug in to a 12-volt power outlet source. We're going to make the bracket, we're going to make the wiring harness, and we're going to wire it in to the circuitry. Okay, this is my 79 Suzuki 1000, and I was thinking about putting it up here on the dash. There's a bolt here I can use. So I'm going to show you what I'm going to do to make this work. Okay, I got my outlet, my lighter. I've got this rubber boot that will slip over it. I don't know what this came off of. It was something I had laying around. I have this scrap piece of stainless. I want to use the stainless. It's a fairly hefty sheet metal. First thing I did is I measured here. It's almost 1.1, and I have a 1 1/8 hole saw, which as you can see is pretty much the same outer diameter. So it'll give me a few thousandths there of clearance to get in here. There's little tabs that hold this. So what I want to do is I want to bore this hole into the sheet metal. But I want to make a cardboard template of how I want my bracket to look so I can transfer it onto this plate. Okay, I've got my cardboard for a template, and this measured out at 1.095, so I set my dial caliper at half of that, which is 5.545, and I set my compass to that distance. And I'm going to trace a circle. And then I'm going to cut this out, and this will give me a good way to hold that power outlet in this cardboard where I'd like it to be, and then I can go over here and shape it. So I'm going to cut this out and I'll get right back to you. Okay, now I got my hole cut in here. I can slip this in. I can take this over to the bike and I can start drawing how I want my bracket to look. So I'm going to use that bolt right there. I want this to sit somewhere right about there. So I'm going to mark where the bolt is here. So my bolt location's about right there. I'm going to use this to trace around this hole with. See, do I have something else that's small and round to work? So where my bolt hole is, I'm center that on there. Trace around. You're going to make these straight from my ruler. I'm just going to come straight off of this, like so. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and cut out the bolt hole. Okay, there's my bolt hole. Now I want this outer circle to be just a hair bigger, because I want this rubber piece to be able to have some space. So I'm going to come out just a little bit further. I'm going to come out. How about that much? Okay, this is my first attempt at a bracket. I don't know how well this will work. I won't know until I go stick it on the bike over here. But you can see how I left myself some space there to let this butt up against. Something like that. Doesn't seem too bad. I think that'll work. I can move it down as far as I want. Clears my speedometer, or my tachometer, my fuel gauge. It's out of the way. Looks like there's enough room behind there for the wires to pass through. And my rubber boot. Okay, instead of trying to figure out where the center of that circle is, I'm just going to place this on here somewhere where I know I've got space, and I'm just going to kind of eyeball the center there, somewhere close, about like that. And it might be easier to go here, take space. That way, all I gotta do is take that off, and I don't have to cut there, and just cut around here. Because this piece is going to be kind of a pain to cut out. And give myself just a little bit of wiggle room. I'll find the approximate center. It's about close enough. I'm going to go ahead and take my hole saw and I'm going to drill this out. Okay, I'm going to get this hole bored out. It's got a round file. Now I'm going to take my pattern and line it up with that hole. And that's my bolt hole. Cut that shape out. But before I cut it out, I want to drill for my bolt hole. Okay, let's see what we're dealing with here. Okay, definitely not a 10. It's an 8. So I'm going to use a 5/16 drill bit. See if my bolt fits now. Yep, fits right in there. Now I'm going to take my whiz wheel and I'm going to cut this shape out. Alright, so I did the grind on the bench grinder. Got it all shaped. Now I'm going to take my Scotch-Brite on my angle die grinder here and clean this up. Okay, I want to add a ring to the bottom of this bracket so I can attach this. I found this is a bushing for a transmission shaft. It seems to fit that pretty snugly, and I'll be able to put like a zip tie or something on here to hold this. But essentially I'm going to weld this onto the back so I have this going on. And I can have something to slip this on, but first I've got to shorten it. So I want to make it flush. So I'm going to go ahead and mark this. And so I'm going to cut that much of it off. I found a bolt and a nut, so I can clamp this nut and the vise so I can weld. and it'll also keep me spaced, because I don't want to come over too far towards that bolt hole, because then it'll hit the riser on the handlebar clamp. So I need to make sure I keep that spaced. So that actually worked out to where it looks like I'm going to be able to just hold it up against that and keep it nice and centered. Alright, so I got plenty of clearance. It'll rest just like that. Still see my fuel gauge just fine. Okay. I think we will move on with this. Okay, so after a little bit of sanding, I buffed that out with some Scotch-Brite. And then got my rubber boot on here. I haven't zip tied it yet. I'm going to wait till the last minute to do that. But this is going to be my mount, so I'm going to stick it on a bike and see how it looks. Okay, well here it is. I think that'll work just fine. It's stainless, so it's not going to rust. I may not paint it. I don't know. Looks okay up in there. A lot of other shiny things, so I don't think I'm going to paint it. I'm just going to leave it this. So the next thing I got to do is I've got to wire it. Now on my bike I have this accessory panel here next to the actual main panel, but this is only rated for 10 amps. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to replace this wire with a heavier gauge wire, because I want to be able to use a cigarette lighter in that if I want to. So next thing I got to do is I got to upgrade this. This goes over to the terminal on the starter solenoid. This is the red wire coming from the battery, and it goes on that back terminal. And it's just an eye on the end of the wire. So I want to make a new wire out of a heavier gauge wire, and then I'll put a 20 amp fuse in here, and that'll give me my 20 amp system. But I don't want to use this 10 amp wire with a 20 amp fuse, because this will burn. So that'll be the next thing. Okay, I have this heavier gauge wire here. It is much heavier than what's on there, if you can see. So it's a lot heavier. So I'm going to use this. I'm going to put two eyes on this and replace this wire with this. Okay, so this is the wire I took off the bike, going from the battery wire to the starter solenoid. This end connects to the starter solenoid, this end connects to the fuse box. So I got rid of the smaller wire and put a much heavier wire. You can see the difference in the size of the wires. So this is considerably heavier wire. I went ahead and soldered on the eyes, added marine grade heat shrink tubing, which has the hot glue inside, and then a piece of heat shrink tube on the outside that I did not heat shrink. I just left it loose, act as a heat shield, as this wire had somewhat of a heat shield on it. So I tried to make them as close to the same length as possible so that it'll fit. So that's my new wire for my 20 amp setup. So I'll go ahead and get this installed on the bike. Okay, I have my wire in place. Now I'm going to add my 20 amp fuse. And then there's a connection, positive and negative, right here to hook the wires from the cigarette lighter. So now I need to remove the gas tank and then feed the wires down to this box. Okay, in order to save myself a 40-mile round trip to the parts store for wiring, I wanted to use 14 gauge wire for this, and also have is black and brown. So I'm just going to use the black for my ground and the brown for the positive. And it doesn't matter what color it is, you can choose whatever color you want, but typically red and black, you know, it's pretty distinct which one goes positive and negative. But I may put a little piece of red heat shrink tube on this. Just, I mean, I'm gonna know that it's the brown is positive, so, but I'm just gonna put a little red on there just to make sure that it doesn't ever get confused. So I'm gonna cut lengths of this wire, and then I'm going to solder and heat shrink them onto the ends of this, and then I'm going to feed them through the bike and then hook them up to the fuse panel, and then the installation will be complete. Okay, with the gas tank removed and the outlet installed, I pulled my wires through, and I'm going to give me a good idea how much wire I'm going to need to make it down to the fuse panel from here. So I'm going to kind of route my wire up through here. So I'm going here. I'm going to give myself just a little bit of extra. And so that'll come to there. Alright, now I can cut my other piece of wire the same length. Okay, a good tip here is to make sure you leave plenty of slack so that your bars will turn without pulling on your wires. So get it to where it's going to stretch the furthest, and then you'll know. Then you'll want to leave that much slack in the wiring. Okay, I have my wiring harness completed now, so that'll plug into the outlet. I got my eyes on here. I marked the positive side with red, and then the only thing left to do now is to put it on the bike. Okay, now I'm going to take my new harness and power outlet and install it on the bike. Install the fuse cover. Okay, now it's time to test the circuit and make sure everything's working. Oh yeah, should work just fine. And that completes the installation. Fed the wires up through there. And now I can charge my battery from there, hook my GPS up from there, I can charge my phone from there, I can light my cigarettes from there. It's handy to have a 12-volt power outlet on the bike for all different sorts of applications, CB radio. And 1 bolt takes it off if I should choose to remove it for whatever reason. And it's out of the way, doesn't look bad, and yeah, that's it. Well, that completes the installation of my power outlet on my motorcycle. I hope this encourages some of you to tackle some of your own electronical additions. Luckily, this particular bike has a accessory fuse panel. Maybe not every motorcycle is going to have that type of accessory. You can always just tap into the battery, right on the battery terminals. But you got to be careful that if you're going to be drawing a lot of current, that you have to upgrade the wiring to the amount of current that you want to draw. That's basically what it boils down to. You don't want to take a 10 amp fused circuit and put 20 amps or 30 amps through that circuit, because you will burn the wiring. That's the whole purpose of a fuse, is to keep the wiring from burning. So if you overload that circuit or if something shorts, the fuse will break and you won't burn the wiring. That's why I went through the trouble in upgrading the wire going to the fuse box, so that I know that there's going to be plenty of wire there to handle that heavy current. The only time I'm going to be pulling any heavy currents is really when I'm using a cigarette lighter. Most of your GPSs, your cell phone chargers, work on very low amperage, maybe 500 milliamps, which is half an amp. And some applications use 10 amps, like maybe a CB radio. So good luck on your installation. I hope this helped you out, and thank you for watching.